Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Constantly Calibrating Podcast, as always, live on Mixer. I am your host, Josh, joined by my special guest, Bryden Keks of Evolve PR.
Hey,
Bryden,
how's it going?
it's I'm doing. As we were talking in the pre-show, I'm in this weird mental headspace right now where it's post-travel and stuff, where it's like, as long as I'm talking, as long as I'm interacting, as long as I'm doing stuff, I'm pumped. I am loving doing stuff. But if I sit still for 1 minute, I I crash hard.
You're asleep.
I
Yeah.
I am sleep. It's the wonders of two children and, as I said, a lot of travel. But I'm excited. I'm very happy to have you on the show. You reached out to me sometime after I made one of my little posts about, hey, does anyone want to come on the show? And I do. As you've seen, I do these once every 6 months or so. Usually, there's maybe two or three people. A few different people retweeted and shared this time,
Yeah.
and a lot of interest popped in. And then I was very happy. You messaged me and said, hey, our returning guest's cool. And I was excited because I loved having you on the show 2 years ago, but a lot's changed in that time. A lot's changed in your
Yeah.
career, in my life and career. A lot of different stuff has grown and changed and shifted, and I've also become way better at doing this shit than I was 2 years ago. So I'm excited. So
Yeah.
what's been going on with you? From we're at the end of the year in in the busy time for gaming, whether it's the AAA games, the mid-level games, the indie games, all stuff. How has working in the VR side of things been for you in the last few weeks? Boil it down to
Yeah, you just bring it down to like this finite amount of time. I
condense
mean,
that.
it's been good. Honestly, uh I don't know, I cheated a bit because in past years I've been around for the fall season, but I actually booked time off the travel in October.
Sure.
And that was really nice because it kind of meant that I was winding some stuff down in the end of the summer. And coming back after that, I've picked up some extra project stuff, kind of got back into the swing of things with some other projects that are more continuous for me.
Sure.
But it was nice to just kind of be like, "Hey, this AAA season's going on right now, and I'm on vacation. Like, what is this?" So, I mean, now things are back to normal. We've kind of I picked up some project stuff, been planning some things for the new year and whatnot. So that's been good. And then was working with THQ Nordic on helping them launch Darksiders 3, which was like a thing that's happened this week. So that was like time consuming in itself, but yeah, it's been kind of nice, honestly, because I haven't felt like this attrition of the fall that sometimes can, I think, happen to not only people that are working on the PR side, but the media side. Everybody gets into a space where there's like so many games you got to play, so many games that, on the PR end, you're trying to fight for this space. And a lot of times we're working with indie developers too. So, we're just kind of saying, hey, stay clear of that time in a lot of ways. But
Like how's
inevitably,
January for you? How's February for you? You may want to
I mean,
back
it
off of it.
it never ends, honestly,
True.
because it's just like, hey, fall's kind of busy, and then it'll be like, but you look at the calendar for February now, and it's like this is looking insane time wise for AAA launches and stuff. So I think like you kind of it's better not to do fall. I think for smaller teams, regardless. But in other periods of time, you kind of have to pick your spot, watch the scene, and see what's going on. But yeah, it's been good for me because getting back into the swing of things this November, I kind of was like focused on getting back into stuff instead of being like dead and tired and at a point where my brain was like falling apart. So I felt refreshed in the middle of the fall AAA season, which is a very strange feeling for me. So
That's really odd. No, I have no conceivable way of identifying with. I mean,
yeah,
I've taken like my first couple of like real vacations in a while. In like this month, I've took 3 vacations at this point. I think I've been gone majority of November, but
that's
it's
awesome.
still consciously aware of everything that's going on around me, in
Yeah,
the gaming sphere and everything. Because this is like you mentioned, it doesn't have to, it's not just the PR and marketing side of things. Everything. It's literally PR and marketing. It's development, production. It's people who work at GameStop. It's every facet of the gaming industry goes into like unanimous crunch mode almost. Of there's just so much going on, so much that we have to be aware of. Because
Yeah.
you have to. It's a multi-factor. A lot of games releasing, whether major games, and I don't want to disparage whether it's the big games or the smaller games or anything in between. There's all that coming out, but then you also have to look at its award season, whether it's the Game Award or it's all of our individual, every website's individual little things that we do. Like, oh shit, I haven't. I didn't finish God of War, or there was that game I wanted to try that I was sent the code for that I just didn't get around to, but actually people are now talking about it in this major sphere. Oh, I really need to get back around to that. So it's like
Yeah.
it's this double faceted uh maelstrom.
And it's interesting too. I think even like on my side, I'm not actively in the game of the year process, whatever, unless we're talking more about, hey, I've worked on X game or we're working with X game and it deserves your attention.
Sure.
But still, from my perspective, as like a fan of the games industry and a fan of games, I look forward to certain lists or certain people's opinions, or like
Sure.
I've listened to the Giant Bomb Game of the Year stuff for years and years and years. So there's a sense for me where I'm like, me and my roommate were talking, and we're like, hey, what are some games that we should get, the knowledge for? Because one, maybe not wanting to hear spoilers because I want to like actually know them
Yeah.
myself, or hear like have a contextual understanding, or just like I only got through this game so far. I was like, specifically Celeste, I think, came out at the same time as Monster Hunter, and Monster Hunter was a really big thing in my personal time.
Mhm.
So I remember trying to struggle with playing both games, and then I just gave up on Celeste, not because it wasn't amazing or anything, but it was just like I was like, I can't do both of these. I need to be fully into Monster Hunter right now. And then suddenly that was what, January or
Yep.
February, and now we're in November almost, or I guess the November almost December, and I'm just like, I haven't, like, I really wanted to play this game. It was great when I was playing it, but somehow I just went 10 months without touching it at all. So I'm kind of, ask some people for their favorite games that are shorter experiences, because then you can kind of knock some of those out. Feel like you have more of an understanding of those. But then also racking my brain through the ones where I'm like, I can get some more time into this one, and kind of like just have a better understanding of it. Because then you get to kind of enjoy other people's opinions and where they're coming from and why someone might be passionate about X game at the end of the year, or for those specific places where you really like a podcast or something, you can get the full understanding of what they're really into or enjoying, or kind of have your opinion upon what they're already debating and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's developing your own appreciation of things. I mean, I like yourself. I like listening to podcasts. I like reading certain sites, and there's the lists I really care about, and the lists, either from individuals or companies that I get very curious about what they have to say. But I can read. For instance, Justin and I did our weekly catch-all gaming podcast yesterday, and during that show at the latter part of it, we discussed the Game Awards, the official one,
Yeah.
and we discussed the nominees, and there were at least three categories, major categories that I looked at, and I'm like, I have not played these games. I've not even heard of that game, and that happens so many times. I'm an RPG fanatic. That's what I play primarily. That's what I'm always was known for. I've literally never played a single game that's on their RPG. Uh, and that was fascinating to me. This is realization of and so I like
I'm
seeing
pulling up the
people's
list right
lists because I want to because I like seeing people's lists because I want to like hop into and be like, wow, I guess I should really go back and check this stuff out, and see these different things. And so I reached this point like where I'm like, this is what my 2019 is gonna be. It's retracing my steps of what I missed. Um,
Yeah, and it's it's hard because there's so many games coming out,
mhm.
right? You're in a spot where like you want to experience that stuff, but it's nice to kind of remove yourself from the madness of the cycle and
Oh
just be
yeah.
like, I'm going to play this game when I want to play it. And I think that's a benefit of where I might be coming from sometimes more too, where I'm like, I'm gonna wait to play this game for a later period when I have the energy for it, or have the want. Whereas that can be hard, I guess, in some cases when you're doing game of the year deliberations, because you want to have that scope of everything, but there's only so much time, and a lot of people can't fit all like half of the games in, let alone all the games in that they want to, talk about.
We're in an age now where games are, there was a day and age, there was a time when the majority of games were 10 to 20 hour, maybe 30-hour top out experiences if you really want to go completionist. Now I feel the average game length is 30 plus in a lot of cases. Unless you are usually talking a lot of the smaller indie darlings, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And even the indie games, which are known for shorter lengths, are actually starting to go with these really long play times, and it's not even filler content. It's not even games that are long for the sake of being long. They're games that are worthy of experiences, and I just it was when Red Dead Redemption 2 was announced as having this absurdly long, like 70+ hour playtime kind of thing. I just looked at that. I'm like, cool. I'm never finishing it.
Yeah.
I just accepted. I just accepted my fate with that. But it's part of the reason why Constantly Calibrating, about 2 to 3 years in, the first 2 or 3 years I was doing this thing, we reported on news. Our game of the year thing was, our whole celebration of things was, it was the best game. And then I came to this epiphany after the third, I think it was the third one we did of them, where I'm just like, most of us haven't played half this. Like we haven't played half this stuff, and it's literally not fair. It's not justifiable to refer this. So everything since that point has been, this is X individual on the team's favorite games, and we've made that a very clear thing that this is just what our favorite thing is, and we've broadened it that you don't have to choose something from the year that it was released, because hell, I know I'm discovering random stuff from 2016, 2017 this year.
Yeah, same. I think that's like a healthy way of looking at it, because the space that you guys are talking about games, the audience that are interested in that, are interested in what you guys are playing, or like what you've enjoyed, right? It's not like you don't have to go up against like the IGN's game of the year, because like and stuff like that, it's like this kind of all encompassing, like, hey, we're gonna have 30 plus people in a room that are gonna like hammer out this list to make this like definitive, this is what IGN as a massive company are deciding is their game of the year. And there's like weight to that, and like there's a lot of pressure to that. So I understand when those teams of people look at the games that came out this year and like, we need to cover all bases, or we need to have people that are in spots that like, someone's got to play Dragon Quest. Maybe it's only a couple people, but they're going to defend that in the room or something like that, and having all the bases covered. So I think it's nice when it comes to looking at the game of the year, like even just within my friend groups and stuff, just to be like, I played 8 games this year or 12 games this year, and this is what I like. So like, for me, when I talk about Red Dead, like I have some mixed feelings about my personal experience of that game, and it was kind of me saying where, I don't know if it's like one of my top 3 games of the year, which feels like insane in my mind for me to consider that, because like Red Dead Redemption is probably one of my favorite games, period, of the last generation. So, it's weird to be in a space where that is. I wasn't going off like really high expectations, but I still was kind of surprised coming out of it being like,
you still had this starting threshold point. You still had a point you were leading in from. So it's not even expectations. You had a point you were coming from.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. Red Dead is, I think, one of my favorite technical achievements in gaming in recent memory. I don't like it as a video game, particularly. Yeah. I still have fun with it. I still enjoy it. It's not. So it is a completely separate experience from almost every other Rockstar experience I've ever had.
Yeah, and I kind of think about that too when it comes to when I was thinking about Red Dead, because I haven't really talked about this like on Twitter or anything like that, but I was thinking about Red Dead Redemption, the first game, and where I was at in my life, and like what type of time I had available to me, or more specifically, like that felt like such a realized world for 2010. And like I remember like getting onto trains and trying to pull off heists and almost like role playing these scenarios, because the mechanics weren't there, but I was just like, I just want to live in this world.
Yeah.
And now this game has so many of those things that I probably would have like given so much for in 2010 to have. Like, oh my god, I can just go in and rob a store and do all like, but like actually take stuff, and the way that it was, or the way that it was in 2010 for Red Dead versus Red Dead 2, there's a significant difference to the details of that stuff. But still, at the same time, I think that the experience of Red Dead Redemption 2 is an interesting one because of like the story and how it plays in the world compared to some of the mechanics. And one of the things that I felt personally was like that there's so much potential for um, kind of like, hey, you're in this living, breathing space, and you could potentially like. I love the idea of like, hey, I want to rob this bank, but I want to like go through the missions a la like Assassin's Creed One, or like other type of things where I'm like, I'm doing the groundwork. Like I've talked to some people in town to see like when the patrols go by, or like someone's speak, like I hear someone in a bar saying that bank's got a lot of money, and like putting the pieces together myself without
Yep.
the strings of a story that are holding that together, and being like, hey, Sadie or Charles from camp, let's go and let's go pull this heist together. I want you to come with me. And like that isn't in the game, but that was something for me, like especially how the game starts off with being like, this is how the world lives and you're just a part of it. I was like, oh my God. And then it just kind of told this to me. I still enjoyed the story, but a very like strong railroaded experience of what that's going to be. And then I was just like, oh, but I want to do it this way, or I want to experience it that way. So I think that's a testament to how amazing the world is in that game and what they built, because it feels like this playground that I just want to like be a cowboy in. But then the story is like a well done story, but it's also like kind of feels almost separate from that experience in some ways, at least to me, from what I could potentially just do on the side, like Arthur going around fishing and doing his thing or whatever, and just kind of having a time feels different than like, hey, we need to do this one more heist because we need to get some money. And I'm like, hey, I got $3,000 on me. If we don't need the, I'll just give you the money. We can go now, right? Like there's some weird kind of, I don't know what the right word would be, but like I felt like a split between two games when I was playing it sometimes. So I just kind of honed in on the story and got through the story because I did want to experience that. But I felt like the more I played the game, the less I actually was just doing the world stuff, and more I was just kind of railroading myself through the own story because I just wanted to get to that point. Whereas like the first chapter or two, I was way more into like trying to skin a deer or just walking around and exploring this world. And by the end, I was like, I don't want to do that. And it was a really weird feeling to be like, I really wanted to do that, but I think because um the feeling of reward for doing that didn't feel like it was connecting to the story. So I was like, I guess I'm just gonna focus on this over here. So
I'm
yeah.
experiencing that as well. I haven't played the game like in a couple of weeks now, just from travel, but I completely experienced that as well. Speaking of Red Dead and like we talk about like length of game and stuff like that, maybe with this get a comment in chat. When people say a game is 100+ hours long, it does the opposite. It makes me want of making me want to play it, as I don't know if I'll have the time to play slash complete it. My I think about this a lot, and I think about this when I get press releases and things like that, and it's a huge factor of I really want to review or stream X game, and then I find out either through through whatever information, oh, it's like gonna be it's gonna be 50 hours just for the storyline, and if I want to go completionist, which my brain doesn't let me not do
Yeah.
half the time, it's going to be 150 hours. You know, teenage Josh, thumbs up. 20 something
Yeah.
Josh, thumbs up. I'm 33 years old with two kids. It's like I have Florence on my phone that is a 45-minute game from what I've been told, and I haven't been able to find time to do that because
Yeah.
everything else going on. It's like it throws me off. So here's my question for you: is when you're marketing, when you're approaching people to check out a game, do you how often do you think about whether putting in the press release or in general in your own thoughts the length of a game and how you're going to market that to some, whether a short game, a medium game, or a catastrophically long game?
Yeah. That's a good question. I think like to me it really depends on who you're talking to, right?
Sure.
I think that you highlight what you feel is going to appeal to X person. And that comes down to knowing, or at least feeling like you do have an understanding of people that you're talking to and kind of what their interests are. If we're talking on like a streamer level, or that type of side of things, you know, coming at it from a space where like, hey, Fallout 76 is coming out or whatever, you really do want to express this like this ability to do what you want and to live in that world. I think like haven't played Red Dead Online yet. I've watched a bit of it, seen that like it's very beta in certain ways. I'm sure there's gonna be more stuff added to it, but that like is a case where you want to talk about like how you can live in that world and do that, because I think those are the cases where you want to show all the variables, all the opportunities that you can experience stuff the way that you want to play, and how I could go with my friends and just be there as long as I want. Because in those cases, I could be me, only go in for a couple hours and have like an appreciation from the outside, while someone else can go in there and play hundreds of hours and have this great old time, right? So that works for that type of stuff. But then it becomes a question of like, this game is coming out at this price or whatever, and what do people expect from that? Like, because there's the expectations of the purchaser, and then there's the expectations of the media person or whatever, and those can oftentimes not actually like line up in the same way. So if you say to me like, hey, I got this first person experience or first person shooter or something like that, and it's like 4 hours long, that doesn't necessarily, I think, come off as a positive thing. Or like you could spin that in a positive way if the experience is really concise and strong and the price it fits the bill of that. But that's a case where you probably don't talk about that in a way, because that's not something that is going to speak to most people, even though like I might be like, yes, give me this really like compressed experience because I don't have the time. So it becomes like it's kind of a question that doesn't have a straight or easy answer, because it's like we look at like each game as like, what is this, what are the pros and cons, and do we look like, can we kind of assess if this is going to be read that way? Because I can have my own opinions, but it's more about like, what is the public going to think, or what is the reaction going to be from you or someone else that's going to potentially play this, right? And when it comes to how long games are, it like it feels like we're all saying we want more time, or we want, or well, yeah, we want more time, but we also want to like play games that are shorter experiences. But I've seen plenty of cases where a game being short isn't something that people feel good about, and it's kind of this like, I don't think it's hypocritical, because it's different people saying different things, right?
Yeah.
It's not like there's this unified voice that's like, we want games to be like this. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that absolutely love playing a game for 100 hours because they are a teenager, or like if Red Dead 2 could be a game that you don't have that much money, you buy that one game and you're like going to
That's
school,
your
and
game.
you play that for 6 months or a year, and that's the game that you probably talk about 10 or 15 years from now, is this amazing experience you had. So it's like, we're not necessarily talking to those people, but we are talking to them when we're promoting games, because even if it's not to the media person, we're going to be putting stuff on Steam for this game to be sold, and we're going to be marketing it through trailers and stuff. And it kind of comes to, I think, a thing that I feel more now is that when we're doing our job, or when I'm working in PR, a lot of times I'm talking to consumers way more, it feels more and more and more, because it's like, how are we getting a direct line to people that are going to be purchasing these experiences? Because those people's interest in the game and like how they are perceiving the game is going to move the needle for why people are streaming it and why people are covering it news wise, because there's so much stuff out there that it's the consumer that is really pushing the envelope, not pushing the envelope, but pushing the game that might have been missed in the email to being something that is being checked on from somebody, because it's becoming a bigger deal than maybe the person that was the media person 2 weeks ago thought, or the person that was a streamer that was like, I don't have time for this. But they will have time for it if people are talking about it.
Well, and yeah,
And
I mean,
that's just a big thing. So
no, it's definitely the case. I mean, one of the things we were talking about recently is the fact of Fortnite. Fortnite was a joke at Constantly Calibrating quote unquote office when it was pre battle royale mode, when it was just when it was just the game that they originally had promoted and stuff like that. We streamed it, we played it, and shrug, you know what I mean? And then it would just didn't do it for us, and then now suddenly it's the biggest game there is, And I know a lot of people who wrote it off, like us, and then it suddenly starts becoming this major force. It's like, well, I guess I have to cover this, or I guess I have to play this because that's where the audience is, and it shifts the
Yeah.
focus, it shifts the narrative.
It was interesting because like Sean on our team works with Epic
Yep.
on Fortnite. So
I've went to the mini golf thing at PAX West. Yes, I'm aware.
yeah, so it's been interesting to talk to him about some of that stuff. Speak from someone that has played actually quite a bit of Fortnite too, and it's weird because you see that kind of reaction from people afterwards, right? And one of the like I like Waypoint quite a bit, and it was really cool to watch them because they do their Waypoint 101, which is them kind of spending I believe it's a month on a game, might be a slightly different amount of time, but they just kind of like were PUBG people that would play PUBG, and then they went over to play Waypoint or sorry, Fortnite, and they hadn't, and it was just them trying to figure out like, okay, how do we do this? And that was strictly pushed by the fact that people love that game. Same thing for streamers. Like most of the bigger streamers that really blew up over Fortnite were playing Fortnite because that game wasn't as popular as PUBG when it was first kind of like the battle royale wasn't as popular as PUBG when it was first coming around. So it's always people looking for spaces to, you know, plant their flag or trying to find, new people to watch their stuff or new people to interact with. And then the ball just gets rolling, and so many of those people just blew up massively because they chose that as the thing that they started playing because they're just like, hey, this seems like it has some potential, and then it went like that. But it's like it kind of feeds back and forth, I think. Like, people that are large streamers or large media outlets have a lot of influence because there are people that are interested in what they're saying or specific people's opinions, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times those people might not know about a game unless their audience will say they have 10,000 viewers that four people in their Discord or somewhere is saying, hey, you got to check out this game, hey, you got to check out this game. And that's kind of like the weird space of like, well, if you do have something really cool, how do you get there? Like, is it through people that are like large streamers just like taking a chance? And like sometimes that does happen, but I really do think that there's a mix of that with also just like a game blowing up because some of my favorite Twitter content is developers that have really figured out their way to make their game into GIFs on Twitter and just like blew up their personal profile because they found kind of a fun visual hook to like make potentially viral tweets about their game. And then suddenly, some even were just like, I'm just playing around with physics. And then they turn out to be making something like a game out of that because they got, thousands and thousands of retweets and plenty of followers. And they're like, I want to play this game. Or like,
Mm-hmm.
I forget, I think his name's Punches Bears. I'm pretty sure the guy that was making the raccoon game.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know
yeah.
if you've seen it. Like that guy like followed for quite some time, and his stuff originally was just like doing weird things with bears with physics, and just people were loving it. And it's like suddenly he's making a physics based game around raccoons and trying to steal stuff, and it's like this small little fun idea. But I think that game is going to sell way more than a lot of other indie developed games because there's just this like it's a fun silly idea that was birthed out of like people telling him, I'm assuming, that they wanted it, and like that's consumer push to make something. Or we talk about hooks for games being so important, and like you can make the hook for the game to then get people interested. Sometimes people hook for you because you just did something that was cool, and then now you're basing this your entire game off this idea that was just like this viral tweet or something like that. And I don't know his personal story in regards to that, but like this is
Yeah.
from the outside, and he's a good example of someone that did that, and that seems to be really going quite well. And yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I think the gifable games is a huge thing. Maple Thistle's reference to the three games mentioned are actually ones I was thinking of myself, which is Untitled Goose Game and Boyfriend Dungeon. Also
Yeah.
mentioned Ooblets, but like Untitled Goose Game was just all these gifs of this goose, biting people's asses and like doing these things, and it was just like this weird kind of thing. But it was adorable and cute, and suddenly it became a game people were very interested in. They had a sizable booth space most recently, at least of events I was at PAX West.
Mhm.
Ooblets as well, and Boyfriend Dungeon, like all these kind of games that are just these quirky kind of things that they just showed off little snippets here and there of a concept, of an idea, or of just just doing some stuff, and suddenly people the interest cropped
Yeah.
up.
Boyfriend Dungeon's a really great example. And I think what they've done is like if you're making a game or thinking about making a game, they are like if someone were to ask me like, okay, who's a developer that you should pay attention to if you're trying to be successful in the indie space? Like what Kit Fox has done is amazing. Really, like, and I mean that because they have an idea, right? It's an interesting idea. And it's a shareable idea because like if you say to me like, "Hey, do you want to play a game where your boyfriend's a sword or something like that?" That's like it's a dumb like it
Uh-huh.
doesn't it makes that like in this space where we're like so many of us are just like garbage memes, things like dumb ideas mixing together in our heads. That clicks. That like is a connected idea that seems like it could actually be really interesting. So if you show me a concept of that that is actually really cool, and you have this really weird idea too, and then it looks great, and you're able to share that with people, like not only am I going to talk about it with people that I know, but that's going to be shared on the internet. And the thing that I think that I don't know, I believe they're doing a talk or Victoria from Kit Fox, I believe, is doing a talk at GDC that I'm really excited to listen to. She's talking about how they made that game a Kickstarter success. And that game wasn't like maybe would have been a success if they didn't do half the work and just try to do that. But there was so much like from at least from my perspective, like boots on the ground. We got to make people know what this game is. We got to make people interested. We got to make content that people are gonna like engage with and like and want to know more. So that by the time they made that Kickstarter, there was people that were like ready to like give them money because the concept was so fleshed out, right? And I've seen other Kickstarters just kind of show up at the door and be like, "Hey, I'm X developer with X pedigree. I have some concept designs. Gonna make this game." And I'm sure that person could make a really great game, or that could be something that's really awesome. But I think it's really been proven that, like, especially because Kickstarter and all that stuff's been around for a while now, you need to like really have a proof of concept, really have a fan base already before you go that avenue. Because if you don't, you're just kind of you're essentially putting yourself up to the wind and being like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? So
Yeah, I mean the crowdfunding kind of thing. It used to be a thing where you could just hop on there and be like, "Hi, I'm Tim Schafer, and this is my game," or "Hi, I'm this famous developer," or something like that, or "Hi, I'm this I myself and these three people worked on this game you love," and yeah, you could get success. But you're right, it's been around forever. We are in a state now that you need a solid foundation. You need that developed community. You need that developed mindset. And you're right. Boyfriend Dungeon is a phenomenal example of how to do that, because that was one of those games that when it actually popped up on Kickstarter, my initial reaction was, this wasn't already on Kickstarter? Because I'd known about the game for so long, I'd been so consciously aware of it. It seemed like it was a game that was ready for all intents and purposes, like kind of a thing. Like it seemed like it was ripe and ready to come out, and then they're like, and we're now, and we're doing our Kickstarter, and here's all this information, and they just this massive page with all this stuff, and it was like, oh, okay. I even had the response of, I honestly don't usually back crowdfunded stuff because I do have the mindset of I work in media, I work as an influencer. I can probably get a code is kind of my mindset if I really want to play that thing. And I also don't want to drop money ahead of time and then it comes out at a time I can't play it. So I
yeah,
like to play the waiting game. That was a game where I was like, nope, I love this. Here's $5.
yeah,
I just support kind of. I respect that kind of community development and what's the word I'm looking for? Nurturing.
yeah. I think like the fact that people knew about that game before it was even on Kickstarter, and it doesn't have those connections to uh, a people or like it's not like a IP or like an idea that's already well versed. We want another one of these, and this person's going to do it because they have the experience, or hey, I'm X developer doing this new idea, but you know me so well that my pedigree can carry me a certain amount of the way. Um, that just like says to me that they knew that they were like, I guess the thing to cut myself out there, I guess the thing that's most important is that a lot of times I think being realistic with yourself about what you have, what you're creating, And then knowing that, like, even if you have something interesting, that you got to work 110% to get that to be something that people pay attention to or are interested in, is like the best place to start off 2 years beforehand or 3 years beforehand, not 6 months beforehand or 3 months before launch. It's like the process of getting to a successful game is like thinking about that marketing strategy and thinking about the stuff that you're doing from like day one, and the actual game you're making is mixed into that. And I forget who it was. I saw another good Medium article earlier this week that was talking about specifically that you are making a game. You are also the marketer. You are also like your job is not like, oh, I'm just over here doing this. Like, you have to consider yourself as an all encompassing person, and bring help to do that. Make sure that you understand what's going on. Don't make ill-informed decisions, but still don't like kid yourself that when you're starting this project from that first day, that stuff is just as important as the actual game design and what's going on there. So at least that's, I feel really like passionate about that, because it's like, we see so many games and we see a lot of cases of cool stuff that might just kind of not get the attention that it probably deserves, or people just kind of hoping that their really interesting idea is gonna land. And I think that, like, that sucks seeing that, but I also have a lot of appreciation for people that are starting to look at the space or try and think forward about the way that they're doing that
Yeah.
stuff. And I think like Kit Fox is a really good example of a studio that could have done that differently, and it could have gone like, the game's not out. We don't know what's going to happen with that, but let's just say based on what we know right now, I feel like what they've done so far is like as almost as best as they could do, and they keep building on that, right? And there could have been plenty of other strategies that they could have enacted on that would not have gotten them to where they are right now with that game. So that's just like good for you for really, like you said, looking at the Kickstarter and just being like, oh, it's all laid out. You know exactly what you're doing. You know exactly what you want to do. Here's the tiers. Here's what's everything that we've done so far. Here's all the work we put into it, and this is where we're going. It's like, as a purchaser or as someone that's backing that too, that also just adds to a great amount of extra confidence as someone that wants to support that game. So
Well, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it makes you more sure of your investment and more confident, particularly in a world where we all know crowdfunding is not exactly always a guarantee. There's been a lot of issues of that nature. As someone who, I think at last checked, I between Indiegogo and Kickstarter probably have like 30 plus things I backed, and I think 20 of them have seen the light of day, and 12 I've actually done anything with. It's
yeah,
an interesting place. So now we are in a space where you need to make it 100% aware for people that this is the thing they're investing in,
yeah.
what they're
I
putting
think
their time in.
when Kickstarter came around, it was just like, it was really, or the idea of, it was like, I think people were really excited about it because they felt like they could put their money where their mouth was, or support these ideas that were not being made um, by a group backing that with money. The way that we look at that now, I feel like, has definitely changed, and people aren't just throwing their money at ideas anymore. You need to kind of sell them on that. And you could make arguments about the as a consumer, the benefits of Kickstarter, or backing something with Kickstarter or whatever. Like, what are you getting out of it? And people's opinions on that, like, appreciate both sides of the table on that. I think people that are passionate about something, that want to see it succeed, like, I have excess income and I like to support things that I care about, because what's the financial benefit? Nothing. I just want to, like, back this content creator or developer or something, because it's just like, hey, why not? Because it looks really cool, and you want to see the good stuff come through sometimes, and that's fine. But also, it's like, that shouldn't be the business strategy of someone using crowdfunding. They need to think about it at a way more thought out level, and I think we see that way more now compared to, let's say, 2 or 3 or whatever years ago. So it's less of an issue, but there's like definite cases of like, hey, these people really did a good job, and then these people kind of like, you know, you could
I think the
come out
reaction to the
better.
crowdfunding space is very similar to the reaction to like what people react to AAA games now. There was once upon a time when the AAA developers and stuff could get away with I don't know, different stuff with their games, putting less, you putting cutting some corners here, doing different things of that nature. Not naming specifics, but just that kind of mentality, because they were the games, and people were unaware of stuff. We've now reached the point, and where we are so constantly aware of every game coming out, whether it's AAA games, whether it's mid-level games, whether it's indie games, whether it's tiny, insignificant, seemingly games. We're all so constantly aware of stuff. So now we hold AAA developers more accountable, which is we also now hold crowdfunded things so much more accountable. Where it's like, yeah, cool, you're bringing back this old title. What else are you doing? How is this special? Why should I give a shit about?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that's kind of what we've entered into, and it's now all about how do we how do you market yourself to make it clear that this is why you should, regardless of what the medium of your output is.
Yeah. And this is a hard thing for me to separate myself
Mm-hmm.
from, let's say, the collective consciousness of the consumer or something like that. It's hard for me to know what is my experience compared to the full experience. But I like, if I'm going to speak strictly from my own perspective here,
Please.
that I am not only in my purchases, but the type of media that I consume, what I read, how I live my life now compared to years before. I'm way more aware of what I'm doing. I'm way more aware of like who's doing what is being made in a certain way, like who all the bits that go together. I think like with being on social media, for me, you become more aware of the backstories or things behind the creation of stuff, or the creation of like what someone's making, or a studio is making something, or whatever. And my point being with that is that I do think that that's also just because we live in a space now that's way more, there's way more knowledge or information shared about that stuff, whether it's like willingly from the person making something, or it's like information getting out about something that might not be as positive about a creator or someone making stuff. And so I think like it is represented from the fact that so many of us have had experiences of either um, you know, games via Kickstarter or other crowdfunding that the project didn't turn out well. So that's like you creating a little bit of baggage for yourself as a person, as a consumer in that way, or seeing that like maybe at a younger age, I would look at like AAA or certain companies as like, oh, everybody's like not looking out for me, but like there's like a best interest type of thing, or like a naive perspective on like bottom lines and stuff like that. And then you realize as you're around that stuff more, or you consume more stuff, but that's not necessarily the case. So I think that like as consumers, especially, like I feel even talking to my brother who's 16, that like has grown up way more connected to using like the internet and social media and stuff, that like the way that he looks at things compared to the way that I looked at things at 16 may just be a better, smarter individual than I am straight up, which he, probably is. But let's just like we'll remove that for a second to say that I think also people are coming into a space where they're able to access more information about the things that they're consuming or watching or doing, and that ties into the way that we market stuff, because I think that you need to be like transparency in the sense of letting people know like roadmaps for your projects, letting people know what your plans are for development when you're making a Kickstarter, talking to people directly via the internet, because these are people that are interested in what you're making. It's like the easiest way to create some rapport or some level of like understanding between one another. And like that's something that I think ties in perfectly to the crowdfunding aspect, where we just have cases of games in the past that really didn't do that, or they dropped the ball in that sense. And then you have people that are just kind of like floating in the wind and don't really know what's going on. And you can point that at like pretty much anything that we consume, in that I feel like the things that I like the most, whether it's music or movies or things like that, I attach like there's a sense of appreciating the artist, and I become more interested in what is being created because I appreciate the artist more. Or when it comes to like the developer or something like that, them being transparent and open, creates more of a relationship for me to want to consume that thing, or along those lines. And yeah, I think that just because we want to have that information and we don't want to feel like we're being um, not like duped or something, but just like being unaware of what's going on. If you're doing a crowdfunded campaign, you want to know, you want to be a part of the process, but having that be laid out is like the best way possible for people to feel like they're being a part of something, that they appreciate the developer, but they also appreciate like the path that they're taking because they're sharing that information. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a
and
good way to look at it.
it's like it feels hard to contain that in such a specific area, because I feel like it's like a thing.
Yeah.
But I guess what I mean is that it's easy for me to connect on a personal level my appreciation of stuff that I consume to the people that are making it, because of the way that they communicate, whether if it's with me directly or on a more just general level, that they're being transparent or talking about the meaning behind stuff or the reasoning behind it, because then that makes some sort of level of like me feeling like I can have a deeper understanding of what I'm putting my money behind, or supporting, or whatever. And in a space where we want to know that who we're supporting to lines up with like how we feel, or how we want to like I want to support people that I feel are creating things that they might not be able to do, like in a space that maybe a larger studio might not support an idea that tells a story that's like less told in the game space. Like if someone tells their story in a Kickstarter that explains how they want to share this, like the story of their past or thing that maybe is less appealing to like a person that's going to invest money in it, and then I can see how that's like really true to them and really interesting, that makes me want to kind of like give that story a chance to like be told, because it's like, okay, this is something that I feel like you've explained well enough, you've been transparent with, or you've also talked about your experience, and I can see why this might not work for you from this angle, but going this way, you're able to like actually do something and have people support you because they truly really believe in your idea. And yeah, I think that like it's weird because I don't know where that's going, but I feel like that's like kind of the path a lot of that stuff is going on. And going back to the Kit Fox stuff, it's just like people coming out with an idea, and letting like kind of the internet be a part of the process of the creation, and then you're like suddenly you have a game, and then suddenly you have financial backing because there's interest, because the internet is interested in it, and then it's like this like cycle of appreciation of like, hey, this the Untitled Goose Game is like a perfect example too of just a game that like turned out from a funny idea into something that has a lot like money and has big booth size or booth space at events. And if like Twitter didn't exist and it wasn't presented in that way, I doubt that would have gone that path. I'm sure it would have been a very different. I'm sure the game might not even have existed. That's like the crazy part about the whole process of like how games are being developed now, or how ideas are being created or whatever.
Well, it's
So
like it's the crowdfunded mentality. It's not even just the crowdfunded financially, which is what we think of. It's crowdfunded literally from, just ideas being brought out essentially. Because until you start workshopping your random thoughts on the internet, you don't realize the value of the idea you had. A lot of us, I think, have a tendency to be like, "That's a really dumb idea," and then you mention it to a friend, and like, I don't think anyone else is doing that, and that's actually really interesting. And you're like, "Wait, not a dumb idea? No, it's still a dumb idea, but it's a good dumb idea."
yeah,
uh,
and I think
I just
Maple.
pitched a podcast idea to a few people I know with the preface of this is one of the dumbest things I've ever thought of, and they all were like, "Yeah, that's stupid. Let's do it." Kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I think like also it comes from a space where you're sharing that idea and there's like passion too. And Maple Thistle is also saying in regards to critical influencers and their kind of ability to tell people a little bit more about like what they should be looking for, or what they bring to the table. And that's kind of, I think, ties into what I was trying to say. It's hard, it feels like an idea that isn't
Hmm.
fully fleshed out in my head, but it's like it's there. And it's like it's the fact that we're like, as a society, I feel like we're way more critical of the way that like things are being made or consumed, and that is leading to us being more aware and also choosing things more selectively when we actually choose to like partake in buying stuff or whatever. And so it's kind of like because we're moving that way, I think, and because that's competition. I think when you are a developer and you're sharing information and you're making it attainable and easy to understand, that like feeds into the kind of movement of that, or even just like throwing ideas onto the internet to see what sticks is just like a seems like a silly idea. I think maybe 10 years ago probably worked for some people and it was less like or viewable to me. But the idea of just like, you know, instead of you pitching an idea to financial backers, why don't you pitch the idea to Twitter? And then you're just putting your ideas out there, and then you start seeing certain things stick, or we're constantly like, when I use Twitter, I'm kind of like just sharing dumb thoughts or whatever. But I'm also sometimes realizing like, oh, this plays well with the people that follow me, or this drops dead and isn't a thing at all. So maybe I'll lean more this way. Maybe we'll talk more about this stuff. We're all like kind of self-correcting based on like feedback that we get from the internet. If we're at least in a space that we're talking with a kind of a either a silent audience or a vocal audience. So it's cool to see that is also represented in the games that are being made, and I think that it'll continue to kind of move along that way. And so how does that actually play out fully? I don't really know, but it's like if I were to kind of think about as someone that works in the industry, like where is my interest at? It's like the developers that are going that route and are getting the interest of their audience, whether it's already there or they're making it. Like how are they doing that and how is that being formed? Because that's like kind of time to like an earlier point. I feel like that's such an influence on what's also being covered because it is a circle, but like the circle is feeling like it's starting more in some ways because of someone making silly goose gifts and then those gifts turn into game, and then suddenly I think that when that game comes out fully that like there's going to be a lot of coverage for it, and it's going to be this really weird moment where you're like, this all started from this little thing and then now we're here, and then that's just like, okay, that's how that game came about, and the list is going to get longer and longer of little ideas that were born off the internet in that way, and how they kind of landed at that position. So
Oh, I think that's fair to say, and I think you're very right on the fact that the Untitled Goose Game is definitely getting a lot of coverage. As someone who wrote the very well thought out notes of just, I wrote the word honk over and over and over again because I had no way to describe that game. I can only imagine what people are going to come up with related to. And yeah, so we kind of been like circling around talking about a bunch of different. Well, we focus on the kind of crowdfunding idea thing, but we talk about a bunch of different marketing related things and sides of the marketing sphere. One of the topics I want to talk to you about, because kind of getting towards the end of kind of our time now, but we didn't get I don't to my knowledge, I don't remember really talking about it last time, but I wanted to talk about working with influence and working with that sphere of that very wide sphere of people when it comes to picking and choosing who you work with and and just the different responses and things like that. How do you feel the influencer marketing side of of working with people, and streamers and content creator stuff has shifted over the last, I don't know, year or so? Because we'd say since the last time we talked.
yeah, it's changing because I think it's always changing. Everything is changing, but
Constantly shifting.
yeah, um, I feel for me, I looked at it as more of like an aspect of how you might be reaching out to people,
Mm.
or an avenue to go down. And I definitely still see that in the same sense. But when it comes to like when I'm working on a game, I'm really just trying to find people that are gonna like when it comes to, let's say we're reaching out to people uh, to cover something. It comes down to consumer and like media and then content creator or whatever you want to say. It's just who's going to be interested in this game, and it's like I kind of look at that as like these are all incredibly valid in their own ways, and like how can we reach these people um on like a across the board scale, because like before I might have thought a little bit more like this game is very streamer focused and that's really important, and I still definitely feel that way about games. It's like, okay, this leans more one way or the other, but it's like there's going to be voices that are going to be interested in talking about those like a game, that are in all spaces. And again, going back to like the consumer side, it's pretty much just about like the consumer knowing that this exists, because as someone that likes a certain type of thing, I want to know that it is in existence, because then I can make the informed decision whether I want to get that thing or not, or experience it. So I think that we have seen like content creation like grow outside of just being like, hey, I'm in this box where I'm doing this thing. And it's like the influence that that kind of takes is just as like a personality and even a bigger sense, I think, and the people that are interacting with that. So I look at people that are going to talk about games, or that are going to be interested in something like across the board, without like, let's say, like a genre of type of creation. And then I also kind of look at like, who are they talking to, and how is that going to be beneficial to the game that I'm working on. So it feels like it's almost like if there was a sense of like maybe moving over to the space because you want to get more attention, because you feel like this game's going to really hit it off in that way. Like I still think that you can make the argument that like certain games are better for certain types of audiences
Oh,
because they
for
just fit
sure.
spaces. But I definitely have walked back personally from looking at projects as like, you want to put these games into certain categories and keep them there, because the categories of like these like people making stuff, I think, are just continuing to kind of like fold over each other in ways, because most like major websites have a video wing or streaming wing of some kind that I think is like kind of leveled out to be something that does exist. It doesn't feel like it's just like this little thing that they're, dipping their toes into. It's a little bit more refined than that, or a little bit more out there. And then you have like on the same side of that, people that are like sharing way more critical, I think, opinions, and trying to like really talk to their audience in a way that is knowing that they are like also consuming it, or interested in the game, when maybe there was, I don't want to say it's a responsibility, but like it just seems that like if there was spaces that these things didn't interact in, I feel like more of a continuing to cross over and kind of blur the lines of that stuff. So it's more like me coming into that space as someone that's doing PR and being like, okay, well, I think that this game maybe leans a little bit more this way, so I'll definitely have more focus over here. But I'm still looking in every single spot trying to find that, and then wrapping that around to like, well, how does this inform the consumer, or how does the consumer know about this, or for us looking at spaces like, how can we just show a game off in a public space before the game's out? Because
Sure.
why not like do that? Because that's a really easy way to get just random people to experience something, and trying to push that envelope more too. So it's like, if I were to be concise, it's just like, I don't really know. It's like way more just moving in different directions. But I think like the content creation space feels way more developed now. And like if you look at Twitch, or we look at Mixer and stuff like that, and what people are doing on these platforms, it feels like there are people that are kind of staples in those spaces, and there's so many new people popping up. And um, there's a lot of stuff in regards to like max number counts of how many people might be watching, or things like that. I just feel like there's like the ceiling keeps getting pushed forward, or there isn't really a massive ceiling on that. Like Fortnite just blew the doors open in a lot of ways for way more viewers. And it's like, I think that people could be like, oh, those are just like people watching Fortnite. But I'm sure that, like, I don't know what the numbers are on that, but I'm sure a bunch of those people just started watching Twitch more
Yep.
because they wanted to watch Fortnite, and then suddenly they decided that they liked watching people play games. And there's like always going to be these little booms that make that stuff happen. And I think that the Fortnite boom was really on Twitch and on Mixer, and like people in the streaming space. So that really benefited, I think, that kind of fleshing itself out more in interesting ways. And it's just like, at least from a nice perspective, when it comes to talking to developers or publishers, everybody takes that as a legitimate avenue now. Having the conversation like 2 or 3 years ago, where like, hey, I really think you should just like push super hard for streamers, might have like, but what about like, okay, yeah, I believe you, that sounds like a good idea, but what about the
Yeah.
reviews? And I'm like, you're not going to get reviews because this game is not going to fit this way. But like, you could get so many people to watch your game on like Twitch, or wherever. It was like, I mean, that sounds good, but like that doesn't, those videos go, or like that isn't a video, it goes away, so that doesn't count for anything. Or just like these thoughts that I'd be like, like this, and
You just
now
want to
it's
almost
way
shake
more.
someone and just scream in their face, "You don't understand."
Exactly. And so I think like we moved from that space where it was no, to like everybody feels pretty comfortable with that. We've moved way past that on the side of trying to look for new areas and stuff. And it's more like it's just all stable now in a way that I think has let a lot of growth happen in really cool ways, so that you get the crossovers and you get like people doing stuff in different spaces that wasn't maybe the case a couple years ago or whatever. Yeah, especially like that's actually a really good point, to like the fact that look at what people are doing in the streaming space, like in public spaces, like as actual like not just influencers of like video games or whatever, but like influencers or brands, or like see people that are streamers that have clothing line, see like, hey, this is the
Uh-huh.
fall clothing line, stuff like that. Like it's people that are going in these spaces too and just being like, I love streaming, but I also want to make merchandise and I'm really invested in it. And like I always wanted to make clothes, so now I'm making clothes with my brand, and it's like it's all about this weird kind of like, hey, I'm this personality doing this thing, and this is where I'm just gonna flex my creative muscles wherever I want to go. And
Well,
that
it's
wasn't probably as much of the case 3 years ago or 2 years ago,
no,
so
definitely not. I mean, we're at this point where it's less streaming. Like streaming was synonymous with gaming pretty much for the majority of the time, and it was game streaming or stuff like that. Now we're really just at personality based broadcasting, really, where people just build their stuff. They build their avenues. I mean, my wife was when she was pregnant was painting a mural in our youngest's room and had 30 people watching. She wasn't even speaking. She
yeah.
literally said to me, "I want to record this for a time lapse. If you want, we could do a streaming thing." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll set you up an account. You could do the streaming thing." She's like, "I'm not going to talk to people. I have no interest in that." I'm like, "Hey, this is okay. I don't know what we're gonna get out of this, but I guess we'll have a recording, and I maybe I'll do whatever." And then yeah, she had people watching and people very active in her chat and understanding that she wasn't gonna talk and kind of
Yeah.
stuff, or very limitedly. So there's something for everyone. It's just the content portfolio of what different people are doing is diversifying, but it's not just having people pigeonholed into this is the painting streamer, this is the cooking streamer, this stuff. There's the people who really just do a diverse amount of things. I mean, right here, I do game streaming, but I do podcasts and I do talks as well. But there's other people who will do a cooking stream and then they'll do a painting stream and then they'll play video games and they'll do the music and then they'll collaborate with people and they'll build that up. And it's just there's so much going on and the space is just building and building and building.
Yeah. And I think like I would like was thinking that exact thought you said, that streaming is
I
not
doubt you were
just
thinking the
playing
exact
games.
thought. My brain was in seven places at once.
No, I meant more the
I
idea
know.
that like, hey, there's people cooking and
Yeah.
painting and stuff like that. I guess what I was trying to say there before too is that like, you know, it felt like people were coming into the space to do a very specific thing.
Hmm.
And it feels like that if you're able to grow an audience, or people are interested in you or what you're doing, that the options for what you potentially can make out of that are like far from untapped right now. And
Hmm.
we're just seeing like people do some really interesting things, and like that is really really inspiring to me, because my brain works in this weird way where I feel creative and think of stuff, and why I like working in PR is because I get to flex some of those muscles for that. But then there's other ideas that I have too, other stuff, and it's like seeing people move in different ways and do different stuff is incredibly inspiring, because it just shows that like if you're able to have a space where people are caring, or aware of what you're doing, you can grow and go into different areas of that. And like when we're talking about like brainstorming stuff on the PR side, like I love my team so much because they're creative and interesting, and I love working with them because we just come sometimes sit down and brainstorm ideas. And it really really feels like there's not really that like idea of a bad idea, because like we can just throw these strange concepts at a wall and be like, well, how do we tie this in? Well, like maybe we don't even have to tie this off the wall idea that somehow ties into this game. And if the developer is interested and thinks that it's an idea that works, then like, yeah. And I think like we were thinking that exact same way like 3 years ago. but they're way more scared of like kind of going into some of those spaces. And now it's just like, it feels bad to be bland or bad to be thinking inside the box. Like I'm not coming up with ideas that I like are pushing in some weird direction or I have to fight for. I feel like I'm not necessarily doing my job to the full sometimes. And that's like uh, it's hard because you then have to really put yourself in a space where you're being creative. But like, I think I'm working on this idea for a game that is going to kind of come together in the next little bit. I don't know if the idea is going to actually come through, but I really hope it does because like we just started Cass on my team who does like research stuff and she's amazing. She came up with this idea and then was just kind of like threw it out there and was like, well, we could do something like this. And I'm being vague because I don't want to share it. But the fact was that I was like, she was kind of not sheepish about it, but like a little bit, maybe. And I was like, no, no, no. Well, hold on. Let's hone in on this because like this could be really cool. And maybe the dev might not be fully into it because there's like risks and money and stuff that we got to do. But like, let's flesh this out and make this as strong of an idea as possible. Because if we did pull this off, then it's like, we're doing something interesting, and that's like our space that we're trying to make people gain attention. And I think like for me, when we do that stuff too, it's more about like not necessarily just fully gaining attention, but also doing something kind of cool or interesting in space that is like adding something to games or adding something to like the project or the experience of people being around it. And so it's in the same way that creators are going into different spots, I think like that is what we try and do sometimes too. And it's cool to be like, okay, we're seeing other people do it, or I feel like I'm inspired by that, and then it like feeds into the work that I do. And yeah, I think that the content creation space of making streaming content is just like it's really great to watch. And like I've become way more of a fan of watching streams just because of the fact that there's so much out there and just like so many interesting personalities too. So
Just the diversity of streaming and just like the what's out there and just what people are doing is just always fascinating. As someone who does this theoretically for a living, I'm always fascinated by what's going on out there. Comment though from Maple Thistles down there. Bless the devs that put their trust in us to do fun and cool things. I like that sentiment because
yeah.
I'm having worked with Evolve PR for at this point the majority of my career. You guys sometimes have some just interesting stuff with the way you promote stuff or like the different things that is unique from the industry. I mean, just terminals alone for a long time is a very unique thing compared to other places. So it's always fascinating to think, wow, I wonder how that pitch session went. And over time, the different pitch things have gotten easier as track record and proven stuff. But I can only imagine certainly in the earlier days of things,
Yeah.
time's gone on.
It's weird for me because I've been with them now for over 3 years and or with Evolve for over 3 years, and can feel it in myself where there's that confidence of like not only do I want to push that envelope, but also like I'm excited to come up with weird ideas and really flesh it out. Like I'm confident I'm staking myself on this because like I really think this is going to be a cool idea. And maybe more imposter syndrome when I was a younger point, and more a lot of other stuff, just like, hey, I don't want to screw up, so why would I do this thing that's like going to put me in this weird like moment where I'm pushing the boundaries of stuff. But that's what I think. If you are coming to us or coming to another space to get ideas or work with people in PR, I think it's a disservice not to try and come up with really ideas that you, the developer, wouldn't think about. Because if we're just kind of playing it by the book or doing something like we're going to do A, B, and C, it's just like, well, you could have read an article or done a thing, and if you had the time, just hired someone that has, maybe a lower budget, or just some like, hey, this is what I need you to do. I don't know, like person just out of school, or does someone want to make some extra money? Like, just send out some keys. Here's some emails to send these keys to. Write this thing out. Like there's definitely a sense to me like that. There's professionalism when it comes to knowing context, knowing people, and like writing press releases and doing all this stuff, or working on trailer ideas and things like that. But actually then taking a step further and being like, okay, well, let's actually try and make the time from now until the game launches unique, or like try and hammer home on themes in a way that we're like not just going to be like simple like little dev diary that says this thing and then that's it or whatever. It's like, well, how can we like take this concept for your game, then visualize it in a way that engages people, and can we make it something that you didn't think of, so that we're like getting into this really cool back and forth on creation. Because it's really awesome when the developer feels like they know you, like they know that you know their game, and then also you guys are like kind of going back and forth in a space where they're bringing creative ideas into the fold, but you are also coming back at them too, and it's like this joint process of trying to like essentially bring their game and their idea and then even stuff on of it to promote it. So
Awesome.
yeah,
A lot to think about. That's really it's really cool. I love chatting with you, and I love chatting with other people, you know, in the PR space, because it's always interesting hearing about how these things. Why is it just I'm in two places? Hello?
yeah. Well,
I think you. Nope, there you are.
yeah, fun.
That was just me in two places. That was nobody wanted that. The wonders of Discord and getting these things working. I was gonna say, like, though we're kind of at the end of time on things. So I love talking to you because I always write out a bunch of notes and get to maybe 10% of them, because you and I both talk a lot and we just go down a path, and I love that. For people who might be interested in more of your thoughts, or what you're doing with Evolve PR, or just Evolve PR in general, where are the places? Plug the places, say the places.
Yeah, so best place to follow me and what's going on with the projects that I'm working on is on Twitter, and you can follow me at Bryden Keks, and so it is just my name, as you can see right there. It's already on the screen, so that's pretty much it. But I work with Evolve PR. It's a great team of people there. We work on really awesome stuff. I'm excited because in the new year, we'll be pushing some cool indie projects, but I'm also working with CD Projekt Red on Cyberpunk going forward, which is a fun thing for me to be a part of, and THQ and their further projects, and Black Desert Online and ConCal. So it's like, you know,
got some good
things
stuff.
are busy. Yeah, it's awesome, and it's really cool to you know, work on games and slowly move your space around in that, and find yourself working on really awesome stuff. And that's the thing that I'm really grateful for, is that I get to work on games that I actually really think are awesome. So, and I genuinely feel that way. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of quiet right now, but you know, come January and February, there's going to be some cool new announcements and stuff.
You say it's quiet, and yet still I get so many emails that I can never keep up with.
I mean, there's always stuff going on.
Sure.
I guess in my head, I'm like winding down in some way, even though I'm still working every day. And then January and February, I'll like be cracking my knuckles and be like, okay, let's get in there.
Yeah,
let's go on this new year. So
get really into that, and as I always say to people who are, you know, going into content creation, going into the media thing, going into freelance kind of thing. If you're actually a professional, let's be clear, I prefer people who are professional, but you're a professional, passionate person who really likes interesting projects, interesting games, and working with interesting people, I always say, go check out Evolve PR, go check out Terminals. It's an ongoing joke of mine at events that I'm trying to collect all of the people who work for Evolve PR. I like to try to meet every person who works, because I've never met a person who Tom has hired that I have not wanted to be friends with to date, pretty much. So so it's always a company I've just been fond of. So I always tell people, you need to check him out. So go, you know, all the places he said, go look up.
Yeah,
I stand by.
Thank you for having me on, though. I appreciate it. And you know, it was funny because I don't even remember what our last conversation was when we did this, but I feel like it went the same way, where it was like, hey, we're going to talk about a bunch of things, but then it just like, you know, we're going to go deep diving on like 3 or 4 and just, you know, get lost in the thoughts of like stuff. But you know, I appreciate talking to you every time, even if it's like not on camera or whatever. We have a good conversation. So just this time it happened to be in front of some webcams and things. So
well, that was the pitch, essentially. You asked me like a couple hours ago, so what's the topics? I gave you a couple of options with a clear thing at the end of, Yeah, no.
Yeah,
This is
we're just going.
this is a concept. We will see where the wind takes us, and that's why I like doing these kind of shows. And I like talking. I honestly like talking to people I'm already friends with because we can just see where the night takes us. Essentially.
Exactly.
So thank you all for. I'm going to do the spiel. Thank you all
Yeah.
for joining us this week. This show is available every Friday at noon on all podcast services and live usually right here on mixer.com/ConCalPod, assuming my router doesn't explode again. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/Constantly Calibrating, Twitter at ConCalPod. I'm at Bear Punch. You can check Instagram at instagram.com/Constantly Calibrating. Usually more used during events. I'm getting better at figuring out how to properly use that. But most importantly, check out our Discord at constantcalibrating.com/Discord to get the most up-to-date info on everything related to constant calibrating, including bonus entries for any contests we might be holding and the ability to further influence our content. Don't forget constantcalibrating.com. Site's pretty important. We're getting a lot more written content out. We actually have a lead editor now, and it's not me. So written content is actually really starting to get a true schedule in place.
Awesome.
I'm really proud and excited about what my team's doing. Please make sure to leave us a review wherever you're able to. It really does help get the show out there in front of more listeners. iTunes, Spotify, best places. ConstantlyCalibrating.com/CC, iTunes, CC, Spotify. You have a service at CC in front of it. I'm rambling now. With that, we bid you all a good sign off.